Hello and welcome back to Shade Tree Philosophy. I'm your host Dave, and we're continuing with our study of the book of Mark today. It's the narrative study, and when we last left, Jesus was in the upper room, and they had the Lord's Supper, and they went to the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus was praying, and so we have come to the moment where Jesus is betrayed by Judas. Back in verse 10, Judas had said that he was going to betray Jesus when went to the Sanhedrin or the elders and the chief priests and offered up a time when it was opportune to betray Jesus. And now we've arrived at that time. And so it's in verse 43, and I'm going to start there. Sorry, I haven't been around. I've had a lot going on in a series of things that have come up, and I've taken care of animals and health, and so it's been a while, so I have to kind of refresh my memory as I go through this, and I hope not to pull in other passages from other Bible Gospels about Jesus and his life. So we're going to try to stick to the narrative right here and not get away too far. In verse 43, and immediately while he spake, cometh Judas, one of the 12, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves, from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. By the way, this is chapter 14, verse 43. So here we are with the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. It's the same clan. And this time they come with a multitude, and they've got swords now. And so, and it's nighttime. And they betrayed him, and the betrayer, and he that betrayed him had given them a token, told these guys that this is what I'm going to do, saying, whomsoever I shall kiss, the same as he, take him and lead him away safely. So, this word safely is in there for a reason. He could have just said, take him away. But Mark's pretty short and sweet, so he must have put this in for a reason. So, it could have been added later to save face or something, but it says safely. So, I think that there was, of course, I thought that the Messiah was supposed to become this leader on earth and take over the throne of David, set the temple right, and set all things right, make the nation great again. And that's what they thought the Messiah was going to be. And so Judas, I'm sure, was thinking that this is because he was convinced that Jesus was the Messiah. He'd seen the miracles. He'd seen the greatest of the works. Seen Jesus walk on water, And so I don't think he doubted that Jesus was who he said he was. I think he was trying to force Jesus in his hand, maybe. At least that's one of the theories. And I know that I picked up that theory from listening to other people's ideas on this matter. But that's not what the scriptures say. It just says that he betrayed him. And that Judas wanted him taken away safely. And so verse 45, and as soon as he was come, he cometh straightway to him. Jesus came straight to Jesus and saith, Master, Master, and kissed him. So he is at least being honorable with him, but betraying him with a kiss. So it's honor and betrayal at the same time. And they laid their hands on him and took him. So there was no delay, apparently. They went straightway. And just took Jesus, and they laid their hands on him. They weren't being kind about it, apparently. And I think, these guys didn't have the authority outside the temple, I don't think, to make arrests. But I'm not sure. I know that the civic authority laid in the hands of the Romans. And that becomes a problem for the Jews because they can't execute Jesus without the Romans helping him do it. So it has to be a conspiracy of enemies. And so I can hear my goats. I have a goat farm, and they haven't been fed yet because it's early in the morning. So anyway, and I'm kind of chilly in here. And so they laid their hands on him. in verse 47, and one of them that stood by drew a sword and smote a servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. So it talks about that, but that's all it says. Somebody in the group got up and struck a servant of the high priest and cut off his ear with a sword. And Jesus answered, I guess, to the situation. This is where I think the English in the original New Testament Greek doesn't always make sense. And Jesus answered and saith unto them, Are ye come out and against me a thief? Now, Jesus had some dignity. He was a righteous man, and these people knew it. There were people that were coming out against him because they thought he was not a righteous man, but they had to make it up in their mind. They had to give themselves over to hate, not to the truth. And Jesus is answering them with some dignity, And he's saying, look, I'm not a thief. I'm not somebody who is a violent person who's leading even a rebellion. He says, I was, let's see, I think it was in verse 48. And he answered and saith unto them, Are ye come out and against a thief with swords and staves to take me away? I was with you in the temple teaching, and ye took me not, but the scriptures must be fulfilled. And they all forsook him and fled. Now, those scriptures that Jesus is talking about, let's see if I can find some passages here that'll help us. If I can get into my, where's that? Sometimes I'm working with my phone, and it's just hard to sometimes make these things work. Okay, so Psalms 41, we talked about that earlier, says, Even my close friend with whom I trusted, the one with whom I shared my bread, has lifted up his head against me. That's one of the scriptures that was talked about already. Zechariah 13:17, Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the man who is my companion, declares the Lord of the hosts. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered, and I will turn my hand against the little ones. That's Zechariah 13:7. Psalms 22:16, For dogs surround me, and a band of evil men encircle me. Isaiah 53:3, He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Like one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and they esteemed him not. Isaiah 53:8, By oppression and judgment he was taken away. In Isaiah 53:12, and he was numbered with the transgressors. That's a few. I got that from let's see, I don't have the article. Unfortunately, I should give them some credit, but it was a quick listen. I took a screenshot. But that's a few scriptures, that Jesus is talking about here. So let me get back to where we were. I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and you took me not. But the scriptures must be fulfilled. And he forsook them all, and they forsook him all of his disciples. And there followed him a certain young man, having a linen cloth cast about his naked body, and the young men laid hold on him. And he left the linen cloth and fled from them naked. What a strange passage in here. About this one guy who had a linen cloth on, and he was following, I guess, to see what was happening. So this guy didn't flee. Who was this guy? He eventually did because they were laying hold of him. But he was following. And you think, why was he in a linen cloth? What, did he just notice or hear something was going on that had to do with Jesus and he was following? And all he had was the time to grab the sheets up off his bed and wrap them around him? I wonder, was his linen cloth pointing to someone who had a certain kind of stature? Was linen cloths available to all people, or was linen kind of special? Because most people had their tunics to sleep in. This guy was naked, so I don't know. It sounds like he just woke up in the middle of the night and was following the crowd. Who knows? Some people think this is Mark identifying himself. But it's in there, in memoriam, forever. Those two passages. Mark 14:53, and they led Jesus away to the high priest, and with him were assembled all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes. So now they finally got the high priest. And so the high priest is the one who has the authority here. He's the top guy. And he's just supposed to be the people who are the most righteous and are representative of the people. So he's taken into these people who are supposed to be fair. But they're not. They're not even starting out. Fairness is not righteousness, and fairness is not what they're concerned with. They wanted to keep the status quo, and Jesus was shaking things up too much. That's really what was going on, and they didn't want the Romans coming down just because this is the Passover week. And so there's a lot of tension between the rulers of the day, the ones who were lording over the Jews, and even the Sanhedrin and the chief priests. And even the chief priest at this time was a token chief priest who was put there by the ruling class, and some of those were Herodians, and the Herodians liked the Hellenization of what was going on. And they were even accepting a coin from Tyre, because it was that's what they kept in the treasury, was a pagan coin that had an image of a pagan god on it. And that's the only gold the only silver that the temple was willing to take. It's very political, and it's very money driven now. It wasn't a place of righteousness, although that's what it should have been. So he's taken before these guys. Verse 54, and Peter followed him afar off. So there was one other person who may be scattered, but he was following. Guy in linen cloth, and here's Peter. We have two mentioned. And he said that he followed him even into the palace of the high priest. So he's taking his chances. And he sat with the servants and warmed himself at the fire. So there were servants of the high priest. So I'm sure there was something about some guy got his ear cut off already being talked about around the fire, and this arrest that was going on. So I'm sure there was a lot going on, but because Peter was cold, it was a cold night. It was like a cold morning. He wanted to get near fire to warm himself. Verse 55, chapter 14. So we're jumping back into the inside where Jesus is at. And the chief priests and all the council sought for a witness against Jesus to put him to death, and found none. So they were asking for people to, come out and tell us a story. Reason why we could put him to death. And people were probably offering a lot of different things, but they could find no reason. They said they sought for a witness against Jesus to put him to death, and found none. Now, this is the key. For many bear false witness against him. Wow. Could you imagine bearing false witness against the Messiah, the Son of God. People who are willing to lie, to have him put to death. Oh, what a terrible legacy to have. So anyway, that's why we should not bear false witness against the Lord. I think that people do in their actions too. That's why, it says don't carry the Lord's name in vain. Don't bear false. Don't say that your cause is God's cause. Understand your cause is your own, if that's what it is. If you're not working for righteousness, you're working against the Lord. And these guys weren't working for righteousness. They were working against the Lord, and they're bearing false witness against the Son of God. How can you do that? Well, they didn't believe, number one. But they sure had seen the miracles. And Jesus wasn't hiding himself, and he wasn't being secretive about what he was trying to teach. They were willing to bear false witness against the Son of God. So here they were coming up with these stories. For many bear false witness, verse 56, for many bear false witness against him, but their witnesses agreed not together. Now, in Jewish law, they had to have at least two witnesses agree, and they could not even get two to agree on what happened. That's pretty bad, number one. That again gives them no right to have anything of violent. I am sorry. I keep burping. All I've had is coffee. But it takes two. And they didn't even have two people that could agree on their lie about what Jesus had done to deserve death. And so they should have just released him. But they didn't. And so they'd already laid hands on him. I'm sure they had struck him by now. It doesn't say that though. And there arose, verse 57, and there arose certain and bear false witness against him, saying, we heard him say, I will destroy this temple. Remember, he's saying, they're saying that Jesus said, I will destroy this temple, right? That isn't what he said. He said, destroy this temple, right? He's talking about himself. It even says that in the passage. But to them, he was saying, he destroyed this temple, This little parable for them to think about. But they're saying, I will destroy the temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands. And none of that is what Jesus said. Jesus said, destroy this temple, and I will rebuild it in 3 days. In 3 days, I will rebuild, I think is what he said. I have to go back and look for instance, but that is not what he said. As a matter of fact, I think I was looking at this, because I did try to go back. And this is mentioned in other passages, that's right, but it's not in Mark. For some reason, this time when this happened is not in here. This is just an example of what they're trying to say, but it's not in Mark. It's in the other Gospels when he says this. What he said, destroy this temple. He's talking to them. He's not saying, I will destroy the temple. But interest is that this particular example is brought up as the example for a reason to kill him. But it doesn't talk about that in the narrative earlier. This is where it's brought up in the narrative of the story in the Gospel of Mark. Strange. This is when it's brought up, and yet it's not witnessed to earlier. All right. In verse 59, but neither did their witness agree together. So even the story that was kind of based on the truth, which is a twisting of the truth, didn't agree. So they're really in a quandary here. So in the midst of all this, here we go. Here comes the move that some individual makes now to kind of step on the procedure and just push this through. He's like, I'm not going to wait for the law. I'm going to step above the law. And boy, isn't that relevant today. It's 2026.